All right, so you guys know what this is right here? This is actually every biochemical process that takes place inside of the cell that we actually know of. Now you do realize that the more we learn, the more then we realize there's more that we don't know. It's kind of like space, right? The more we learn about the infinite volume of space, the more we realize, wow, it's actually way bigger and way more complex than we thought. And so when you look at our knowledge of how the body works and all of these biochemical processes, they actually say we only know about 3%, and it never gets any better than that. And the reason why is because as soon as we learn a little bit more, then we discover there's more that we don't know. And so literally you have these biochemical processes that are happening inside of your cell, and it happens literally trillions of times every single second in all of your trillion times, or in all of your trillion cells. Like, how amazing is that? So I want to teach you about every single one of these biochemical principles, okay? And we're going to start here, and then we're going to go through all of them, and I think probably about 5 or 6 o'clock tonight we'll end up down there, all right? Is anybody excited for this? I am, okay. This is why we have some smoothies for you, and and we actually brought some mats that we can take a nap on in between. Is anybody really excited to do that? All right, I didn't think, all right, Debbie is. Don't worry, we're not going to do that, all right? Here's the thing when it comes to health and when it comes to healing, is that you don't need to know everything about everything. And the reason why I say that is this, is that the body is governed by laws and principles. And really the only thing that you need to know is what? If you know and understand the laws and principles of health and of healing, all of these things take care of themselves without you actually having to be like knowledgeable about it, okay? Now, here's the problem though. Here's the problem with people today that are having problems with the gut, problems with sinus issues, immune system issues, thyroid issues, digestive issues, like headaches, whatever, cholesterol issues, whatever these things are, is that what medicine does today is they look at this one biochemical principle that happens right here, and they fix that by giving you another what? Another chemical to manipulate it. And so while it may actually fix or improve this biochemical principle, the problem is that what happens here, do you think it affects this right here? And do you think it affects this over here? And then over here? And so you see that when you take this for that, you're not just influencing one, you're influencing the thousands of other chemical reactions that are taking place downstream. And now you understand why when there's this miracle drug today ends up being the most disastrous drug 5 years from now. So you have to understand is that this right here happens, and you can't chemically manipulate one without it affecting everything else. So what you have to know is just the principles of health and healing. And what that means is that you have to know how to nourish the body. You have to know how to give the body the right types of nutrients in order to have the right types of hormone responses inside of the body. You have to know how to oxygenate the body. You have to know how to maximize the integrity of the nerve system to influence the function of the brain and the spinal cord. You have to minimize the amount of toxic exposures inside of your body, or how to properly detox. And you actually have to know how to do all of that without being overly stressed out. If you really apply those 5 principles, then these things right here, they're designed to take care of themselves. You don't have to think about it. It'll already happen on its own. So instead of teaching you about all of these, I want to teach you some principles that are really easy to understand, and that's going to help fix 90% of the issues that you have going on. Now, do you guys have a second brain? Most women would say that men don't have any brains, but everyone actually has 2 brains. Now, our number 1 brain is located where? It's located in between the 1/4 inch of our skull, and that's our primary brain. This is the one that makes the executive decisions. This is the one that's responsible for all function and healing inside of the body. And the brain actually communicates with every cell by way of the spinal cord, number 1, and also communicates by way of your neuroendocrine system, or your neurohormone system. That's how the brain communicates with all the cells inside of the body. Now, this right here is the most important, and a lot of people today have damaged brains. Would you agree? Anxiety, depression, high amounts of stress, can't sleep. These are all brain or even autoimmune diseases like MS, Parkinson's disease. These are all brain-related conditions. ADHD, autism. So these are all brain-related conditions. But what a lot of people don't understand is you also have a second brain. And your second brain is actually located or known as the enteric nerve system. This is a big word, meaning you have a bunch of nerves that are located in your gut, in your stomach, your small intestine, and in your large intestine. And this second gut is actually responsible for how well the gut and the brain communicate back to one another. How many of you ever heard, I just felt it in my gut? Or how many know when you get a stress response, you're like, you feel it in your gut? And it has absolutely to do with that response between the brain and the gut communicating between each other. And in fact, what you mean by this enteric nerve system, it is comprised of over 100 trillion bacteria that live in your small and large intestine. And it also is comprised of over 100 million neurons that originate in your in the lining of your small and large intestine that communicate back and forth. And so this brain and this gut is in constant communication between each other. And I'll give you an example really how important this actually is. How many of you have actually heard of serotonin? Anybody heard of serotonin? Yeah, so serotonin is they call it a neurohormone, and it's how neurons communicate with one another. Serotonin is known as your happy hormone, because if you have abundant levels of serotonin, guess how you feel? I'm happy. I feel relaxed. I have this general feeling of just being awesome, and I can't really tell you why. That is a product of serotonin. Now let me ask you something. Where is most of your serotonin made? Do you think it's made here? 95% is made in your gut. So you know what that means? Is that if your gut and your enteric nerve system is sick and damaged, guess what? What do you think some of the things you're going to have problems with? Anxiety. Depression. How about this? Most people don't know that serotonin is responsible for your ability to stay asleep at night. And how many people do you know fall asleep, wake up 2 hours later, and they can't go back to sleep for 2 hours? That's a product of serotonin. 95% is made in your gut. Now here's another neurochemical that's really important. It's called dopamine. How many have ever heard of dopamine? So you look at some of these issues with dopamine, like Parkinson's disease, for example. But a lot of people have heard of dopamine, but they don't know what it does. Dopamine is your reward neurochemical. It's also your motivation and energy neurochemical. So like, how do you know if someone is really low or having problems with dopamine? Is that a lot of times they'll say this, you know what, I wake up in the morning, I just have no energy or no motivation to get out of bed. I don't know what it is, I can't put my finger on it. Dopamine is also this, it's what does this ding 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 button in the brain. So I know some of you probably try to get a lot of dopamine, and how you try to get dopamine is that you're always on your phone, constantly updating your Facebook or Snapchat. That actually increases dopamine inside of the brain. If you wake up in the morning and you need like caffeine, like a caffeine IV, just to get back to the point of being tired, this is a problem with dopamine. If you have a really hard time starting tasks, like you're like, oh, I don't want to even get started. Once you get started, you get back into it. This is a problem with dopamine, and 50% of your dopamine is made where? In your gut. So you guys see how important, in fact, when people ask me, like, I want to revolutionize my health, I need to transform so many things, where do I start? First thing I started is, okay, so let's start fixing the brain by actually de-stressing the brain, and the number one way that you de-stress the brain is you actually improve alignment into your spine. You guys know that? Because what is providing the stimulation and the feedback to the brain is how well the spine is moving. You have to think of it as a windmill that's generating the power back to the brain. And so if the spine, I mean, have you guys ever seen anybody looks like this? What happens is the spine stops moving correctly. It starts giving bad input and bad information known as proprioception or feedback back to the brain, and the brain does this. Whoa, this is not good, and the brain starts to get stressed out. So what happens when the brain starts getting stressed out? You start getting a stress response, which then it can actually damage the gastrointestinal system, mess with hormone function. The first thing you have to do is you have to start fixing the spine and brain. The second thing then that you do is people say, well, what about detox? Or should I do a cleanse or something? I say, no, don't detox, don't do that. You have to fix your gut next. You have to think of like fixing it upstream. And if you fix the gut, then you start to actually lower stress hormones, just like you're addressing the spine and the nervous system and the brain. And when you fix the gut, you actually start to fix your serotonin, you start fixing your dopamine, and actually secondarily you start fixing like your hormones, like your thyroid, your adrenal glands, and you actually start fixing like your energy levels and your immune system. Now, how many people know that like 50% to 70% of your immune system function is located in your gut? And so if your gut is off, this is also why people have a lot of issues with autoimmunity. So you guys know some autoimmune diseases that are out there? Hashimoto's thyroiditis, yeah, which is a huge one. And I'm seeing so many people diagnosed with it now. Like, how many of you know a woman who has a thyroid condition? It is a lot of people now. So thyroid conditions, multiple sclerosis, scleroderma, lupus, like all of these are considered autoimmune, celiac, autoimmune type diseases, okay? So yes, you do have a second brain. Now here's the gut. These are the surprising symptoms. If you have problems happening in your gut, a lot of times this is not just like, I have constipation and diarrhea. That's like the only way I know if my digestive system is off. That's like usually the end stage of having really bad gut problems. But if you have symptoms of gut dysfunction, you'll suffer from anxiety or depression, also poor sleep and fatigue. Remember we talked about serotonin and dopamine. You will have a thyroid issue, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, hypothyroidism, digestive issues like reflux, bloating, constipation. So how many of you, after you eat, you like feel like boom, like you get on the scale and you're like, why did I just put on 8 pounds of water? So bloating, constipation is huge. What about reflux? For example, if you're taking reflux medications, that is not correcting the problem. And research actually shows now that if you're taking reflux medications for 3 years or longer, you have a significantly higher chance of having dementia. You cannot take these. Problem is that, remember we talked about those biochemical functions. So you take one and it's a proton pump inhibitor is usually what they're called. And so you take it there and it only fixes that biochemical thing. But now downstream all these other things actually happen because you started to manipulate actually one. So reflux and things like that, guys, this stuff is easy to fix. I've had people get off of reflux medication in 2 weeks. And you just have to start doing the right things. The problem is a lot of times when we take a medication, it's almost like a doctor giving us a permission note or an excuse to keep living the same destructive lifestyle. So you're not getting away with it. Now, also you can have issues with diarrhea. By the way, do you guys ever had that, has anybody ever thrown up before? Okay, yeah, I'm assuming everybody has. Or has everybody had diarrhea before? Do you actually know the neurochemical that gives you the feeling of the cramps from diarrhea or the nausea? Do you know what neurochemical does that? It's serotonin. So serotonin can make you have that feeling of nausea or that cramping feeling with diarrhea. Now, what about the immune system? This is huge too, because how many times if you had allergies would you say, I probably have a problem with my gut? Never. What about sinus issues? This is huge. Like, so how people get this chronic sinus infection or congestion all the time. So they're getting sinus headaches, sinus pressure. They're always blowing their nose. And you know what we say? We say, oh, it's the weather. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm in the same weather and I don't have sinus issues. And they say, well, it's just genetic. And I'm like, so you have the genetics for having a lot of snot in your sinuses? I don't understand. It's not our genetics. What it comes down to is you have any type of health condition, it comes down to your inability to adapt and inability to be able to heal. Do you think you were born with sinuses that are supposed to work right? I think so, right? So sinus issues, asthma, colds, and flu. So if you want to radically change your immune system even, this is true for your kids, you have to fix the spine going in the brain, you have to fix the gut. Those are the two things that will make the biggest impact with all of these different issues going on. By the way, does anybody have any of these? Does anybody have at least one? So just a couple of you. So all of you are pretty good, right? All right. Do we have anybody here that refuses to raise your hand because I'm not going to participate no matter what? Oh, there you go. Well, hey, guess what? I just got you to raise your hand. So, you know, so the thing is that when's the best time to fix these? 10 years ago. The next best time is right now. So I'm going to show you, number one, how you start fixing the spine, how you start fixing the gut. And actually, listen, if you're a guest here today, don't worry, I'll offer the help to you. You guys are going to need help, and so I'll show you exactly how to get my help. And the other thing too, if you guys are patients here, I want you to think of the people that are in your life who's suffering with this, and I'll show you how we can help those in the next week and a half. Okay? So the problem is like anytime you have a bad gut, you're also going to have a bad immune system. So you'll notice bad immune system, poor sleep, anxiety, depression, the hormone issues. And so here are some of the reasons why you're going to have a bad gut. So number one, you're going to have a poor nutritional status. How many of you believe that your nutrition is just on point and rock solid? I mean, it is perfect. I won't even raise my hand, right? So if you even eat what today we would think a healthy diet, which like standard American diet, which is a lot of grains and low fat, that's actually one of the worst things that you can do. So most people do have a poor nutritional status, and it's some of the reasons are that you have vitamin deficiencies. How many of you know if you have a vitamin deficiency or not? You do. Like we do testing in our office that can look for B vitamin deficiencies, fatty acid deficiencies, and things like that. But like an easy test is like you can do your vitamin D test. You can do a blood spot vitamin D test and see if you have any kind of vitamin deficiencies. But even having chronically low vitamin D can influence how well the gut is able to function and heal. You will also cause a bad gut by having a high carb, low fat diet, which is actually what we did for 30 years in the United States, is a high carb, low fat diet. And what about this? A small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Have you ever heard of this? SIBO. So, you talked about, when people take probiotics, right? So have you ever heard of probiotics, your gut microbiome, which is the 100 trillion cells that actually help your immune system that live inside of your gut? Well, the problem is that you can have you need a growth of the good, but a lot of times the bad can actually overgrow and overtake the good. And so we call this SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. What do you think the number one thing that destroys the good bacteria and promotes the bad? Antibiotics. Yeah, so like antibiotics are kind of like, it's like the ignition to it, and then sugar and things like that is like the fuel for the fire. And so like how many of you have been on an antibiotic? Any of you? Yeah, if you're not raising it, everyone's been on an antibiotic. And I haven't taken an antibiotic in 3 years. Well, guess what? If you're eating conventionally raised meat, 75% of people's antibiotic exposure comes from eating conventionally raised meat. And what that means is that you say, hey, Dr. Nate says that actually red meat is good for you because it has high amounts of fat, and no sugar. So let's go over to Jewel and let's go ahead and let's get a ribeye. Now the problem is you get conventionally raised meat or ribeye, which is chock full of antibiotics, and 75% of our exposures is actually not from taking antibiotics, it's from getting the exposure to what they took. And that can cause a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, damaging the gut. Inadequate sleep will destroy your gut. Poor oxygenation of your body will destroy your gut. So how many of you do high intensity short duration training at least 3 times a week? At least 3 times. And so that is actually something that can promote gut health, although some people who have really bad guts, I actually tell them to not exercise. And there's a really, really big reason why. If you want to know why, you can text that to the number, okay? Digestive distress. So what causes digestive distress? Well, stress. Have you guys noticed that when you're stressed out, anxious, or worried, or fearful, how that causes digestive distress? That's a huge thing. Do you guys know that eating on the go can cause digestive distress? So this is like, hey, I'm really busy, let's go pick up something from Panera, and you're eating it in the car, versus sitting down for 30 minutes and slowly eating your food. And unbalanced stress hormones. So this would be like having high cortisol, and especially at night, versus having higher cortisol in the morning, all right? So how the brain affects the gut, okay? So you have to look at it almost like the safety pin cycle. So the gut is talking to the brain is talking back to the butt, the gut, not the butt, kind of like, and so you always are having this feedback between the two. So the brain influences the gut, and here's primarily how. Primarily via stress, okay? So when you are in a chronically stressed state, it affects the function of the gastrointestinal system. You guys know this. Have you ever been like unbelievably stressed and like you start getting diarrhea and whatnot? So you know that the brain connects to the gut. Now, what's really interesting is they took, in this research article I was reading, they took like 47 people who had irritable bowel syndrome, and they took them through 6 weeks of teaching them about stress reduction. And one of the things that they actually taught them was like meditation. And meditation, I say, is a broad term. It's not like doing, that. It's just spending quiet time to calm down the brain, right? And this is like, it could be quiet time that you're reading the Bible, or you're just sitting and thinking about absolutely nothing, or maybe going into like a float tank, of an hour of complete sensory deprivation. Can you imagine that? An hour of complete without Facebook? Yeah. But what they did is they had these people do this for like 20 minutes every single day. And like after 6 weeks, they found a dramatic improvement in their irritable bowel syndrome. What they also found is then when they looked at their genes, they also found that these genes that promoted chronic inflammation actually shut off. So how amazing is that your brain can influence the rest of the body? So you want your brain to be the least amount of stress on it as possible. Now, what you also have is the gut affecting the brain. So now you have the gut that's actually talking back to the brain that's with this communication type pathway. So just remember, so that the gut is providing 95% of your serotonin and 50% of your dopamine, what means is if you have any kind of damage to the gut, the body's not producing, their gut's not producing serotonin and dopamine, do you think it actually affects the function of the brain now? Absolutely. And so, you guys ever notice, like if someone is suffering with depression, and in fact, I have a lot of people who come in and they're taking antidepressants, and antidepressants actually, they're called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So those drugs actually don't promote the making of more dopamine, they prevent the nerve system from reuptaking it, so it's just kind of floating around in the cytoplasm. And so, here's what usually happens. Is that so people initially go to the doctor, they have anxiety, they may have depression, and usually the doctor doesn't ask them these questions, tell me how you're sleeping. I bet you probably have a hard time staying asleep, and they say, how did you know that's serotonin? And they say, generally, how are you feeling? Or when they come in and I say, I bet when you started those medications, you felt really good for 6 weeks. And they're like, yes. And I'm like, and then you felt like it didn't work anymore. Then you felt like you had to take the medication just to feel depressed. And they're like, yeah, how did you know that? I said, because the body adapts to that. So the body will adapt to anything, which is why if you look at any study, the benefit from any kind of antidepressant actually only lasts for 6 months or 6 weeks, and then basically the body then adapts again to back to where it was before. So the gut can absolutely cause things like anxiety, depression, and problems with sleep as well, let alone thyroid and adrenal issues and things like that. So there's two things that you have to do. Number one, you want to fix your brain, okay? So fix the brain, and then number two, you want to fix the gut. So we want to work on rebalancing your brain chemistry by increasing sleep, decreasing stress, get your power turned on, right? Get your power turned on. I'll go over what that means. Number two, you want to fix your gut. So you want to repair what's known as a leaky gut. So anytime you start damaging the gut, we'll call that leaky gut, and you want to start rebalancing your gut bacteria. Now raise your hand if you've ever heard of leaky gut or leaky gut syndrome, okay? And I know it's kind of thrown out there like without much discretion, and you're like, oh, that sounds like a kind of like a, you know, like today's hip term, like I got leaky gut, baby. And so but I'll actually go over with you exactly what it is and then how you actually fix that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to fix the brain so that it's communicating properly to the gut, then fix the gut so that it's communicating back properly back up to the brain, okay? So here's the first thing on how you actually fix your brain, okay? So you can't just fix the gut and have it communicate back to a stressed out brain, right? Because then what's going to happen? Healthy here going to here, you're going to break that safety pin and it's not going to have the brain influence the health of the gut. So, how many of you know, how many of you ever heard of Dr. Roger Sperry, a brain researcher? He won a Nobel Prize, by the way. And he won a Nobel Prize based on his research that he said 90% of the stimulation actually going to the brain, do you guys know where it comes from? It's actually not from the gut, it's actually coming from the movement of the spine. So what happens is when you talk about having a healthy brain, so like your brain is like constantly making all of these executive decisions, right? I mean, on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level. And so in order to have a healthy brain, the healthy brain has to constantly have input. That input we call proprioception. Do you guys know what proprioception means? I'll give you an example. I want everyone to close your eyes and go ahead and clap. Nice job. So I know that you have proprioception. So have you ever asked yourself the question, how did I know how to hit my hands without looking at it? Right? So how did I know how to do that with my eyes closed? Well, what that is that you have these proprioceptors in all of your joints and muscles, and they're constantly giving this feedback at the brain saying, hey, brain, my wrist is out here. Hey, brain, my wrist is right here, and this is why I can touch my fingers together by having my eyes closed. And so if the brain's getting that proprioception, they're like, this feels really good. I know where I'm at, I'm getting the right amount of information, so it's really important to have proper proprioception going back to the brain. Now here's the thing. Guess where about 90% of the body's proprioception is located? In the joints of your spine. So out of all of the different parts of the body, 90% is located in the joints of the spine. Now, here's the kicker. About 95% of that 90%, do you know where it's located? In the top two vertebrae in your head, at C1 and C2. So almost all of your body's proprioception that's going back to the brain is related to the top two vertebrae and how well they're moving and how well they're aligned. So let's say, for example, you get in a car accident or you get hit. And I'll give you a perfect example. What's happening to NFL players like crazy? What are they suffering from? Anxiety, depression, no energy, and whatnot. And what has every single NFL player at some point, what have they suffered from? A concussion. Now think about it. If I hit my head like this against something, what will I also damage? I will damage my upper cervical neck. And so what happens is that if that area gets damaged and starts moving incorrectly, so have you ever seen people, they look like this or they look like this? So what happens is now the brain or the spine stops giving literally 90% of the stimulation going back to the brain. This actually puts the brain in a stress state. It says, oh my goodness, something's happening. You're not giving me the information that I need, and now the brain becomes stressed. Now the stress hormones inside of the body start to go completely crazy. And by the way, this can actually happen in the absence of pain. You do not have to have neck pain in order for there not to be the stimulation going back to the brain. In fact, most people don't have any kind of neck pain. That's actually the last thing to show up is neck pain. Obviously, one of the first things to show up is you'll look at someone and you'll see that their posture is off. So you can go out and I look at everyone's posture when I go out. I've actually already analyzed all of yours. But that's usually the first thing. Because, I mean, so can a child have a problem with their brain due to the upper part of the neck in the absence of any kind of pain? Absolutely. So you can get a trauma this way, car accident, but what are we doing like crazy now? We're doing this. Now, if some of you are part of our TCC Healthy Patients Facebook page, I put a video of you guys up with people, with a person, what their neck looks like when you're in the text position. And so you have 60 degrees of flexion actually will tether and damage the spinal cord. So if you leave a tethered spinal cord or a stretched spinal cord for 2 or 3 hours every single day, I mean, my goodness, what I'm really concerned about is the influence it actually has on your brain, okay? So the stimulation of the brain, to have an unstressed brain, you have to have a spine that's working the way that it's supposed to, providing the right type of feedback back to the brain. Now, here's usually what happens. So if I have someone who comes to me and they're like, Dr. Nate, I'm here because, you know, I want you to fix my leaky gut. And I'm like, great, let's work on your spine. And they're like, why? Well, I know, it's here. It's right here, you don't understand. I'm like, you have to start doing both, obviously, at the same time. I can give you a perfect example. This is actually just someone who started with me like a month ago. And by the way, for those of you who started working on getting your spine and nervous system checked, how many of you noticed that even before maybe like neck pain or headaches got better, you actually first noticed that you started to feel more relaxed, that stress levels started to go down, and you were sleeping better? I will tell every single person, like, listen, before like maybe like that back pain goes away, you're first going to notice that your brain is going to start healing and that you're going to start sleeping better and generally be in a better mood, and you're not going to know why. So here's why this actually happens. So I had a patient who came in. She actually had migraine headaches. So migraine headaches, she's 32 from the time she was 10 years of age. So 10 years of age, she had a pretty major trauma and developed migraines after that. And then not too long after that, she developed a heart arrhythmia that needed open heart surgery twice for. Now, why on earth would my heart start going out of whack when I injure my neck? Well, a lot of people don't realize is that this area right up here, this actually is protecting what's known as the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve does everything involved with rest and digest. That nerve is really critical, so it helps to calm down the heart. So it lowers blood pressure, a normal cardiac rhythm and everything. So after she injured that, the cardiac rhythm in her heart started going haywire. So rather than actually fix the nerves, they tried to fix the heart, which is kind of like if the alarm is going off, the fire alarm is going off, I'm like, hey, don't worry. They're like, go find the fire. I'm like, no. Let's just go. I'm going to take a sledgehammer and I hit the alarm. Like, now see, you guys don't hear the alarm anymore. But you're like, yeah, but there's a fire in here. And they're like, no. I took care of the alarm. But how many times do we do that? We have a digestive problem. We're only trying to correct the alarm and not find the cause. If we have a headache, we're not trying to fix the cause of the headache, we're trying to fix the alarm. So migraine headaches, then it finally developed, by the time she was about 28, with chronic neck pain. So she had the problem first, then it started to develop like chronic neck pain. She would then also have problems with anxiety, and she couldn't sleep. So she had all of these symptoms that her brain wasn't working the way that it's supposed to. Now this is her eyes and teeth. Here's the back of the head. So this is actually the curve in her neck. That red line signifies that that is normal. So that's where it has to be. So these black lines have to match up with her. So actually her spine had 60 degrees of misalignment in it. 60 degrees. And that's actually one of the worst ones that I've ever seen. So we started adjusting her for the first time, and by the way, she was so scared to do it, right? Some of you are probably like really scared, and I'm like, well, what scares you more, that or like going under the knife? I mean, afterwards, I wanted to just follow up with her, and so I said, hey, how are you doing? I want to see how you're responding. She said, well, good, I was really sore last night. Well, obviously sore because she started using muscles and ligaments, started moving her neck back. But she said, I slept great. I haven't slept that well in like years. She's like, why did I sleep so well? As I said, because we just calmed down the brain after we started to correct your spine and nervous system. So I actually just saw her today. We've been seeing her for about 5 weeks. We're going to be re-x-raying her in just in not too long. But I asked her, I said, hey Daniela, tell me about your anxiety that you had. She's like, I don't have it anymore. And I'm like, see, I told you that would happen because we started to correct the brain. And that's what's so important. So this is normal right here. So like you see how the ear lines up with there? So you have to have a normal curve, and then you have to have the head over the body, okay? So do you guys see, like, as you age, you see like the head starts going forward in front of the body? And so this is actually what happens to the spine. So this is not age, this is damage to the spine that goes uncorrected. It's almost like a cavity that you have. The cavity gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's not like, well, I'm 60 and I got false teeth, it's because I'm old. No, it's because you've had more trauma to the teeth over time that wasn't properly addressed. So now when you see this, if you see the spine in that position, you'll actually see it doesn't move at all. Now, have you ever, when someone is in this position, tell me how mentally acute they are. They're not. So we just say, well, it's just supposed to happen as you get old. But when chronically in this position, it provides no input back to the brain. The brain is not stimulated. And whenever the brain is not stimulated, just like a muscle, what happens to it? It shuts down and it starts atrophying. So as far as having a healthy brain, you have to have actually a healthy spine. So how do you know if you got any kind of damage happening into the spine and into the nerve system? If you got any kind of pain, especially chronic or recurring, hey, if you're a guest here, I want you to listen up to this part because this is really important. So chronic pain, headaches, including migraine headaches. Now my wife, when I met her, had migraine headaches for 6 years. And do you know when her migraine headaches started? She was a tumbler. So she was doing all these tumbling things and she missed it and landed in a flex position on top of her head within 1 week, started getting migraine headaches. Now, we've known each other for 15 years. She's had 2 migraines in 15 years, and I still think that's probably the only reason why she's still married to me. Do you guys know, if you imagine, you have high blood pressure, for example. Do you guys know that the vagus nerve actually is what controls your blood pressure? But I want you to think of this. If the brain is stressed out, your brain is going to say, listen, we need to get you out of this crisis or emergency, and an efficient way to do that, if you need to get away from a bear, is to raise your blood pressure, right? And what drives me crazy so much is like when people go to the doctor, and they're stressed out because their job is stressed, their family is stressed, or there's marital stress, there's financial stress, and so they go to the doctor, and the doctor takes this 30-second snapshot of what your blood pressure is and decides that you need to be on a blood pressure medication for the rest of your life. So he's not asking, hey, tell me about your day, your month, or tell me about your last year. They're saying, nope, 30 seconds, high blood pressure medication for the rest of your life. So they're not taking into account the chronic stress that you're actually under. So I want you to think about it. If right now the lights shut off, we locked the doors, we lit a fire in here and put a fire alarm and strobe lights in here, and there was no way for you to get out, and the room is filling up with smoke, and then 10 minutes later we said, okay, go ahead, go out this back door, and then there's a doctor there with a blood pressure cuff. And so immediately you guys line up to get your blood pressure taken. Every single one of your blood pressure is going to be what? It is going to be sky high through the roof. And if the doctor said, well, you have high blood pressure, let's put you on a blood pressure medication for the rest of your life, what are you going to say? You're going to say, wait. You didn't ask me about the stress that I was under. So whether it's a real threat or whether it's a perceived threat, so like stress from your job is not a real physical threat, but the body doesn't look at it as real or perceived. It just looks at it as stress. And so, high blood pressure is a huge issue. And you can lower your blood pressure within a couple of weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. Poor or inadequate sleep, this is an indication that you have damage and a loss of input in the upper part of the neck. What about like memory problems? How many of you have a problem with memory, right? So all of these are actually working together. hormone dysregulation. This is a huge one, because you have no idea how many people that come, like most of the people that come to me now have some kind of hormone dysregulation, like thyroid, estrogen, like they're having menopause into their 70s. They're like, I'm still going through hot flashes into my 70s. Why? This is massive hormone problems. They have problems with painful periods. Or how about men? Do you know how many men come in and they're like, well, doctor says I have low what? Testosterone. Well, guess what? If you're stressed, your body doesn't care about making testosterone. It only cares about you staying alive. It doesn't want to make testosterone. And so the doctor says, well, you need to take this underarm testosterone gel, and it costs people $300-400 a month to do it. And I can get people to make testosterone normally, and it doesn't cost you $300-400 a month to do it. How about chronic fatigue? What about chronically getting sick? Now, this is also chronic sickness. When you're like, yep, every November I get sick. I just pretty much count on it, right? That's a chronic illness. Because for some reason, once your environment changes, and it changes to this environment, and you're always getting sick, you're not adapting to it. So we have to get you to be able to adapt to this. What about allergies, chronic or seasonal? So are allergies to something you're born with? That's what I was told. My mom said, well, I got allergies. I have asthma. You're going to have it. And I'm like, okay. And I had allergies and asthma. But you know what I also did? I also drank 12 Mountain Dews a day and ate 8 pieces of white bread every single day and 4 Snickers, ate whatever I want. My mom said, you're eating too bad. And my dad said, eat whatever you want, he's a growing boy. There's no wonder I was so sick. No wonder I always had antibiotics for my ears. I always got bronchitis. I had my tonsils out. I had all of that. Because even by the time I was like 10 years old, I had irritable bowel syndrome. My gut was absolutely tanked. Any kind of digestive regulation. But here's the thing. How many times do you guys eat every day? I know some people 2 or 3 times a day. Guess how many bowel movements you should be having?
3.
You should have a bowel movement after you eat every meal. Okay, so if you eat 2 meals, you should have 2 bowel movements. If you have 3 meals, you should have 3 bowel movements. If you're eating 3 meals only having 1 bowel movement, you have severe digestive dysregulation. So here's the thing. The first thing you do is you work on fixing the brain. By fixing the brain and the nervous system, that's the first step that you have to do and the most important step in order to work on getting this fixed. All right, so the second thing that we're going to go over is we're going to go over how to fix your gut. So let me show you some of the different things that are going to damage the intestines, specifically damage the lining of the intestines. So when we talk about leaky gut, what we're talking about is the lining of the intestines have become damaged. And normally when you look at your gastrointestinal system, the gastrointestinal system, when you eat food, it should actually stay completely separate from your body's internal environment. So when you put something in on the north end and it makes its way through to the south end, that whole digestive system is actually completely separate from the internal environment of your body. And that how it stays separate is because the lining of the gastrointestinal system, the small and large intestine, is sealed up by the lining of the GI system. So when we have chronic stress, toxicity, when you have drugs can cause a leaky gut syndrome, specific pathogen, bacteria and virus, any kind of organ malfunction, or damaging type foods or food particles. Can you name a damaging food that can cause leaky gut syndrome? So like grains, and especially what specific type of grains that contain what kind of protein? Gluten, right? So this is how we got this whole gluten craze, okay? So, by the way, let me ask. Usually, someone will ask this question, and I'll say that like, well, I'm gluten free. Is that good enough? And I say this: just because it's gluten free does not mean it's healthy. Okay, so there's this whole like I'm gluten free, I'm healthy. There's a lot of unhealthy foods that don't contain gluten. Mountain Dew, for example, does not contain gluten. All right. So here's what happens. So here you have a normal, healthy gut lining, we'll call it, and through all of these different types of traumas, it actually causes the lining to separate, okay? So here's the inside of your gastrointestinal system, and this actually goes into your bloodstream. So then what happens is that once this gets damaged through here, it causes inflammation, it causes a separation of the gastrointestinal lining, and so now what happens is you'll get large food particles that never ever should see the internal environment of the body. The body is then exposed to it. So you'll get large food molecules that gets exposed to the bloodstream. And so what happens is that like the immune system's not actually supposed to see this. So those particles are supposed to stay inside of the gastrointestinal system and they get eliminated through your stool. But once the gut starts to separate and the cellular junctions begin to loosen, now you're getting these large molecules. And so the immune system's coming along and they're like, wait a second, that's not supposed to be there. So anytime that something's not supposed to be there, what does your immune system start to do? It starts to attack it. And so a lot of times, if the immune system is constantly getting stimulated, it'll then start freaking out at everything. You can train your nervous system to be freaking out at everything. And so this is where the research is now heading and saying, well, this is where a lot of this autoimmunity is taking place, is in the gut, because your body is getting exposed to these things that the immune system should never see in the first place. And by the way, there's another thing that we do quite a bit that exposes our immune systems that the immune system should never see in the first place. And the doctors tell us to get that every single year around this time or September, at a flu shot. And actually any single doggone shot for that matter, is that we are exposed to things in those things, the chemicals in them, that our immune systems were never ever supposed to see. So then what happens is immune system issues obviously leading into autoimmunity. Do you guys know anyone who has an autoimmune issue? You know, it's like 60 years ago, like, no one's got like this now you have people who have lupus and scleroderma, who have Crohn's disease, have, Hashimoto's, so many people, rheumatoid arthritis, and these things can be massively improved. Like, if any of you know Tia, right? Rheumatoid arthritis, it's gone. And so this was by fixing her brain and actually working on fixing her gut, okay? So these are some of the issues that will be affected if you have leaky gut. All right, so colon issues would be constipation, diarrhea, irritable bowel syndrome, or irritable bowel disease. Thyroid, Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, or Graves', which is hyperthyroidism. How about your skin? So you guys know that your skin is a direct reflection of the health of your gastrointestinal system. Have you ever seen a kid with eczema? Well, you know what? A lot of times kids who have been on a lot of antibiotics are going to have more eczema. Or people who have a lot of problems with like ringworm or athlete's foot or toenail fungus. This is a problem in the gut. So acne, rosacea, eczema, psoriasis. How about the brain, depression, anxiety? How about even ADHD? Now we have a boy who started with us about 5 weeks ago. His name is Alex. The kid has been off the wall from the time he was adopted. So by the time that he met his parents, or his adoptive parents, he was about 4 years old. And from 4 years old, the kid was just off the wall. And not only just ADHD off the wall, but he was actually like defiant. Like, you're like, this kid is violent and whatnot. So we started fixing actually his upper part of the neck, and then we started settling down his gut. And like the mom came to me like this week, she's like, I know you haven't been seeing him. Is this crazy that like he's like a different kid? It's like, is that weird is that supposed to happen? That's exactly what's supposed to happen. We're fixing his brain and fixing his gut. Now how about this? How many of you know sinus and mouth issues, like frequent colds or frequent sinus infections? So if you keep getting this sinus congestion and whatnot, you're actually having an immune response that's happening in the gut. Now how about your joints? If you have leaky gut syndrome, you'll also have chronic joint pain too. How many of you like wake up in the morning and you're like, why does everything hurt? Like, I don't understand. I didn't deadlift today, but my back hurts all the time. Or I didn't squat, but why are my knees so sore? So chronic joint pain. What about the adrenals? So how many of you suffer with like a lot of fatigue, like chronic fatigue? The place where you start is actually fixing the gut, okay? Now I'm going to go over with you in just a little bit some protocols that you actually do to start fixing the gut. I will tell you this, the protocol that I'm going to go over with you, it's kind of a generic protocol, all right? Now, in my office we get it, like when it comes to like correcting people's spines and nerve system and brains, we don't do anything that's generic. So there's not a one fit for every single person. When you start talking with a gut, I'm going to go over a protocol that's going to work for probably maybe 80, 85%, 90% of you. However, I will say this, is that maybe some of you, your leaky gut may be caused by some different things. One of the things that I'm not going to be talking about is like those who have like candida, yeast type infections, which some people do. I don't see it too often, but I've tested about maybe 200 people, and I have seen maybe 5 or 6 people have a candida or a yeast infection, okay, in their gastrointestinal system. But people ask me, like, how do I know if I have a leaky gut? You can go off symptoms. I will tell you that testing is actually the best. So can you actually test for candida, leaky gut syndrome, energy system issues, problems with your serotonin, dopamine, things like that? You absolutely can. So I test a lot of people through urinalysis. So you can do this through urinalysis. And in fact, when you look at this one right here, this is actually a test that we do that actually measures for things like the number of good bacteria you have in your gastrointestinal system, if you have a small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And in fact, this number right here where it says indican, that is a clear indicator that someone does have like leaky gut syndrome. And so you can actually see that like when this person came in was really high in this indicator, and that was indicating leaky gut syndrome. So we put them on like a GI protocol, and I'll go over with you, what it was in just a second. But this is actually 3 months later, you can see that like that indican went completely back down to normal. She had another one in through there. That went back down to normal too. So you can on tests you can actually see that you're fixing these leaky gut issues. And so like guess how she felt like in 3 months? You probably can actually tell. You look at the test and I'm like, hey, you're sleeping better, right? Like your energy's come back. You don't have as much chronic pain, correct? They're like, how did you know that? I'm like, yeah, because we know all the things that are influenced by the gut. Okay. But here's the thing, if you ever wonder, like, if you went out into the general public, you'd probably say that, would you agree that most people probably have some level of gut dysfunction? Yeah, and so here's the reason why. This is when we go to school, and in fact, when my kids, when they take like health and they come home with like, this is what you should be eating, and I'm like, what? And I'm like, don't listen to them. They're like, but my teacher, they know everything. I'm like, just don't listen to them. Everything else, listen, but not when it comes to nutrition. So this is actually what they teach. This is what they teach as far as like the American diet. So here you have a plate, and basically, you have about a third is coming from fruits and vegetables. You have about another 40% that's coming from bread, rice, potatoes, and pasta. Now think about it. If you're getting 40% of your nutrition from bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, what are you getting a lot of? You're getting a lot of sugar. You're getting a lot of a simple sugar that can damage the gut. It's wrecking your hormones. It's making you put on weight. It's destroying your energy, wrecking your adrenals. And not only that, most of it contains gluten, which most people they don't tolerate it well anyway. So most people don't tolerate gluten very well. Some people it's just a little bit, and some people they can't literally even touch it. And that's the people who have like Sprague's disease, that are on that other end of the spectrum. But actually most people don't tolerate gluten all that well. And then you have conventional milk and dairy products here, which, by the way, that's going to contain a lot of casein, and casein can be very inflammatory, which is a protein in milk. It can be really inflammatory to the gut. And then they say, you can have some sugar in the form of your colas and pies, and so then you got your meat, fish, and eggs and legumes. And so really when you look at it, like the only thing that's going to be pretty good is going to be maybe this and this. So you understand that most people are getting like maybe 40% of their nutrition is actually good. And listen, and kids get away with it for a year, but you don't get away with it for 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. And so a lot of times when we're young, we're like, so far so good, and then we wonder at 30, you're like, why am I putting on 30 pounds? I haven't done anything different, and it's finally catching up with you. Now here's the thing, a lot of times like what you do now, you don't really see the payoff until like 5 years from now. And where you're at with your health right now is really a result of what you did 5 years ago. So this would be right here, this would be like your traditional home-cooked meal, right? Yeah, and when I was growing up, this was my home-cooked meal. And we would say like, yeah, I eat a lot of great, hearty, healthy. Anytime I see hearty and healthy, I'm thinking like this or like a really unhealthy like pre-cooked like stew or something. Yeah. So this is your hearty, healthy, home-cooked meal. And this is nothing but, like tomato paste pasta is with sugar and pasta which is sugar, and ground sausage. This is your to-go lunch that a lot of people do, right? So a lot of damaging fats, again, a lot of grains, and probably a conventionally raised meat, okay? This is your traditional breakfast, right? Which again is going to be, eggs aren't necessarily going to be bad, but a lot of processed meat, and then obviously a lot of simple sugars and carbs and damaging fat. And then you got this, we call this the Widowmaker, right? So if you want to leave this earth a little early, this is the KFC plate. So there's actually, when it comes to this, there's nothing that's actually healthy about it. Food can be your greatest form of medicine, or it can be your greatest form of poison. It's just how you choose to utilize it. All right. So now, the first thing we do that we want to, when we're fixing our gut, is we want to remove things that destroy our gut. Okay. This one's pretty easy. If it comes in a box, don't buy it. I don't know. Yeah. Well, what about this? And I'm like, listen, chances are, just work with me here. Chances are, if it's in a box, don't buy it. Well, what about this? Just don't buy it. All right? So remember, we talk about principles versus knowing how to every single thing about everything. The reason why is that if something's coming from a box, number one, chances are there's going to be preservatives in them, not good for your gut. Number two, chances are it's going to be high in gluten and sugar. And also monosodium glutamate, also known as MSG, or it has a ton of different names for it. So get rid of it. Number two, remove your gut destroyers. This would be grains. Now, this is not just wheat too, because how many of you know that rice, oats, corn, and barley, by the way, we actually put some raw oats in there, so you probably did get a little bit of gluten, just a little bit, okay? So grains would be not just wheat, but all of this, specifically if you do have some kind of gut dysfunction that's going on. So it's not just the wheat. All of that actually contains gluten in it, all right? The third thing is dairy, milk, yogurt, and cheese, okay? Now it's really hard, most of you, how many of you actually would go to an organic food store, or you get your dairy from from cows that's raw, and it's raw, unpasteurized from grass-fed sources? Yeah. So not that many people get it, will go get it, because they actually, did you know it's illegal to transport that across state lines? Yeah, it's illegal. You can't do that. So most of the dairy that we're getting, it's conventionally raised, which means that if I'm telling you don't eat a bunch of corn, then the cow shouldn't eat a bunch of corn, because you're not what what they ate. And so not only that, it's pasteurized, which destroys a lot of the nutrition in it, and milk typically has a lot of casein in it, and a lot of people don't tolerate the protein casein. Can be very inflammatory to your gastrointestinal system. Unless you're getting raw milk is always going to be better for you, okay? And then the last thing that you remove is you're going to remove antibiotics, okay? Now, the reason why most people have some level of gut dysfunction is that we were raised on antibiotics, right? We were raised on it. In fact, at one point, I was on antibiotics for 90 days straight. Can you imagine? You know what happened to my gastrointestinal system after that? I don't think it's still recovered. And so I remember I was 21, and so I started getting tonsillitis. I had strep throat. And so I went to the doctor. He's like, oh, you need antibiotics. So I took a course of 10 days of antibiotics. Then 3 days later, what happened? My strep throat came back. I went on antibiotics. 5 days later, it came back. So the third time, by the third round of the antibiotics, they're like, well, you just need to get your tonsils out. And I'm like, I'm 21. They're like, yeah, I guess your tonsils are bad now. And I'm like, well, why are they bad now versus when I was, 6 or 7? So they're like, well, we're going to schedule you, we'll schedule you out to get your tonsils out. And I was like, well, I can't do it like right now, but I can do it on my Thanksgiving break. And I was in college still. And they're like, okay, just be on this round of antibiotics. So I constantly took antibiotics, never knowing how much it was actually destroying my gastrointestinal system. Because you have 100 trillion healthy, beneficial bacteria inside your body. And an antibiotic is knocking out the bad ones, but it's also knocking out all the good ones. Okay? So no one actually said, well, let's check the neurology going into the tonsils. And so I actually had really bad, an area in my lower neck that wasn't moving right. The second thing was the doctor never said, I'm curious what you're eating. And I'm like, I was eating tons of what? Grains, sugars. And I thought I was getting away with it because I worked out all the time. So even though I was eating tons of bad food, I looked good. So I look good on the outside, super sick on the inside, which is, a lot of people who are into fitness, they tend to do that. So I took a lot of antibiotics. And by the way, do you guys know that if you or your kids are a product of a C-section, that you'll actually start the process of having gut dysfunction pretty quickly? And the reason why is that if you or your kids didn't go through the birth canal, through the vaginal canal, that's actually your first inoculation of healthy, beneficial bacteria, is you going through the birth canal. That's when you start colonizing that in your gastrointestinal system, is going through the birth canal. So if you're a C-section, it never happened. Which is why kids who had C-sections, why they suffer more with things like ADHD, things that are affecting the gut and the brain, ear infections, sinus issues, and things like that. So that's actually the first problem that this actually runs into. And then they have ear infections, and what do? We give them antibiotics and more and more and more, and then we wonder why our kids are having all of these different kinds of issues. Now, I never would want to go to the days when we didn't have them, right? Yeah, I wouldn't want to go back, but we're overutilizing them. Like for every 20 times that we're giving it, it should be used maybe once. Okay? Now, some of you say, I've never been on an antibiotic. We're also going into commercial, most of your chronic antibiotic exposure is coming from the meats, conventionally raised meats that you're actually eating. So the second thing that we want to do, this is really cool. Some of you may actually already do it. And we want to talk about how to nourish the gut. So we want to remove those immune system downers. So we want to remove the things that are damaging it. Now we want to start inoculating it with healthy bacteria. So we want to start nourishing the gut. And so this would be eating fermented foods. So I want to teach you real quick how to ferment your own foods. Now, how many of you have ever eaten sauerkraut? All right, so sauerkraut is a fermented food. So these foods that when you ferment them, what happens is they provide lactobacillus, which is a probiotic, which is a healthy form of bacteria, lactobacillus, and it helps to produce lactate, which is actually very healthy for the gastrointestinal system. And in fact, if you've ever seen our vitamin D, for example, it does contain lactobacillus. Now, just a word of caution, some people actually can get a lactobacillus overgrowth because they're taking too many lactobacillus-based probiotics. So you can actually overgrow too much good, too. So fermenting your foods is a really, really cool thing that you can do. So here's what you do. You go ahead and you can take vegetables. And so let's say that you decide that you're going to take cucumbers. You're going to slice these up as thinly as possible. You're going to take celery, and then you're going to make celery juice. Celery juice is going to be the medium and you're going to put the thinly sliced vegetables into the medium. You can put it into a mason jar, or what's even better would be a what? Yeah, a fermentation pot. And the reason why is if you put it into just a jar like this, these kind of trickle up to the top, or maybe the vegetables aren't submerged under the celery juice. So a fermentation pot, you can actually see if you look inside, the water will be up here, but it will push everything underneath the medium so that to ferment things, it'll be just a little bit better. So basically, you do that, you sit it out, you're not putting it into the refrigerator. What's that? And then 2 to 4 days later, you now have, you can actually enjoy fermented food. So you'll actually be nourishing your gut when you do this. So you guys know some other forms of fermented type foods?
Kombucha.
Kombucha, right? So a lot of people like to brew their own kombucha. I don't have time to do that.
Fermented tea.
Yeah, it's a fermented tea. It's really good. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually do it, and this is something that's really easy for you to do. So the third thing that you want to do is you want to nourish your brain. So you want to nourish not only the gut, but the body and the brain. This gets into like, what is the best way to nourish the brain if you have some kind of gastrointestinal issue or leaky gut syndrome? And I would say the best way to nourish the gut and the brain is through ketosis. Okay? How many of you have heard, like I said before, ketogenic diet, right? And I know a lot of people are like, I'm so keto and whatnot, because you notice that a diet that's actually been around, or a nutrition plan that's been around for a long time, it just like gains traction and gains popularity as if it's something new. And ketosis really is not like something new. It's just, it's come around full circle, and probably, 5 years from now, the Atkins diet is going to be back in vogue, or the paleo diet. So we like to affix a name to a diet to say that we're actually doing something or following some kind of program. Now the thing with ketosis is when you look at ketosis, the body actually uses fuel in two different ways. Most people think that the brain can get fuel by way of sugar or glucose only. How many of you thought, well, my brain's got to get some kind of sugar, so if I don't constantly eat sugar, my brain's going to just like shrivel up and die? And that's not true. So your brain uses either sugar, or if you don't have sugar and your body needs to grab energy, it'll grab it from fat stores. So you then have to become a really efficient fat burner. When you are burning fat, your body uses ketones, keto. That's where we get it from. And actually the brain's preferred method of fuel is ketones. Ketones actually is almost, you have to think of like sugar as like a very dirty, inefficient fuel. Yeah, it's almost like if you go and you get like leaded gasoline. Versus if you're running on ketones, ketones is like you running on natural gas. Like it's very clean, efficient type fuel. And the brain loves to work into ketosis. Now, recently there's been a lot of traction where people are like, hey, rather than get myself into ketosis, what if I just took these ketones from like a ketone powder? So should I do that, Dr. Nate? And I'm like, well, if you can do it on your own, I would rather have you do it on your own. And the reason why is this, is anytime you take something exogenously, they call it from outside in, then the body has a hard time doing it on its own. So for example, if I said, I'm going to supplement my workouts with testosterone, so I'm taking testosterone from outside in, then my body then says, hey, you know what? I don't need it. I don't need to make it because I'm already getting it, so I don't need to make it. And it's very hard for the body, once you eliminate it, to start doing it on its own. So if you can do it on its own, it's better. So ketones basically is, instead of running on sugar, you're running on ketone bodies, which is using fat for fuel. By the way, a side effect is you lose a lot of weight, a lot of fat doing this, okay? Now, not only in ketosis, but there's another thing that you can utilize in ketosis, and this is called intermittent fasting, okay? How many of you have ever tried intermittent fasting? All right, so like intermittent fasting typically works better for men than it does for women because our hormones are a little bit different. But basically intermittent fasting is this. Sometimes you eat, sometimes you don't. But you're not sticking to, I gotta eat 3 meals a day and 3 snacks every day. You know how like if you go to a fitness trainer, they're like, you got to keep eating to keep your metabolism up? Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, how to get into ketosis is actually by incorporating fasting. So listen, 300 years ago, 500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, we didn't sit down and eat 3 snacks and 3 meals a day. They were just like, hey, we just killed the bear. Let's just eat it all, and then we'll eat in 3 days. I mean, that's how it was. So here in the United States, we eat way actually too often. And actually, the more that you eat, the more it can really kind of wear down on the gastrointestinal system. So how many of you were told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day? And that's really just a wives' tale. So, yeah. Now, like here we got these wives' tales. Those are really hard to break. It's like saying running is the best form of exercise. I'm like, nope, it's not. That's a wives' tale. And they're like, people get really like, no. It's like, I can even give people a preponderance of evidence that running is not the best form of exercise and prove it, yet they're still going to exercise. Because sometimes our belief systems are more, or have a stronger hold on us than actually the truth. So sometimes you eat, sometimes you don't. The longer you don't, the more that good things will happen to you. So for me, I don't eat breakfast. I don't eat it. I haven't eaten breakfast today. So when you look at breakfast, breakfast means what? Break your fast. So if you slept 8 hours and you didn't eat right before you went to bed, let's say you went to bed at 6 or 8 at 6 and then went to bed at 10. So by the time you wake up at 10 in the morning, you're in a fast for 12 hours. So when you get into 12 hours, what they found is your growth hormone is through the roof, things that help you to burn fat, build muscle, and so when you break that fast, the growth hormone goes back down. And so what they found is like if you just kept fasting, there's a huge benefit to your gastrointestinal system and actually to your immune system. Did you guys see the article that just came out that said if you fast for 2 days, you basically regenerate the whole entire immune system? Yeah, and so you just so fasting isn't necessarily a bad thing. So if you are in fat burning mode when you wake up in the morning, then intermittent fasting just says, okay, then just extend it a little bit longer and have your first meal at 12. How many of you are like not hungry in the morning anyway? You're like force yourself to eat. Right. If you're not hungry, don't eat. Right. So with intermittent fasting, now what you're doing is you're doing this. I recommend that you do like a 16-8. And what that means is that skip breakfast, eat at noon, and then don't eat after 8 o'clock at night. Nothing, okay? So that way you're eating for 8, and then you're fasting for 16 hours. And then what you can do is you can be a warrior if you want. I actually did this yesterday. So I actually did not eat until 6 o'clock at night. So that was my only meal. And I was fine. If you can burn fat as an energy source, then you don't necessarily have to eat. So a warrior would be 20 hours fasted, 4 hours. So that means maybe from like 4 to 7, 4 to 8, you have that 4-hour window to get all of your nutrition in. So this is actually a great way to be into ketosis, help to take the stress off of the gastrointestinal system. What should you be eating within that time period that you're eating, okay? So that's really important. So you're like, I'm intermittent fasting. This is amazing. You know, I'm doing the warrior 20 hours fasting for it. And then in that 4 hours, I have a bag of M&Ms, right? So you want to make sure you want to make sure that you're doing good things within that time period, okay? This is basically what, like getting into ketosis, how you would, the type of nutrient density or content or macronutrient makeup that would be. So the first thing is this, 65% fat. Holy cow, my doctor says I need a low-fat diet, right? Well, if it's low-fat, then you're obviously replacing it with what? High carbs, which has to come from sugar. So 65% fat, you want about 30% proteins, really only 5% of your calories are coming from carbohydrates. And really the only form of carbohydrates that you're getting is in the form of green, leafy, fibrous vegetables. That also means 0 sugar, which means 0 bread, 0 rice, 0 corn, 0 barley, 0 sugars whatsoever, no flour, none whatsoever. Your only carbs are coming from green, leafy, fibrous vegetables. Okay? So, when you look at your fat content, by the way, I made this beautiful graph and then I wanted to outline this. I'm not very good at drawing, right? Obviously. All right, so don't judge me on my lack of artistic skills. So here's like fat. So like when ketosis is helping to heal the gut, you want fat and you want a lot of fat. Fat is anti-inflammatory and it's unbelievable for you. Do you guys know what this is? Eggs, butter, coconut oil, avocados and avocado oil. Now, if you're getting organic raw cheese, this is a good form of fat. Raw nuts, raw seeds, and then I'm a huge fan of MCT oil, so I put MCT oil in smoothies. We cook with MCT oil or coconut oil, which MCT stands for medium chain triglycerides. So I actually will have about probably 70 grams of MCT oil, which is all saturated fat, and by the way, it doesn't raise my cholesterol or anything. Actually, what raises the cholesterol is too many carbs. And then I take omega-3 fatty acids. So I take healthy omega-3s and healthy omega-6s. So I don't normally do ketosis. And so how do you know if you should do it or if you're not? If you definitely have gut dysfunction, that's something that you should do. Now, once you fix that, I'm not a fan of like always being in ketosis. You got to change it up. So I wouldn't work on ketosis or ketogenic diet any more than like 3 months tops. And then maybe going back to it a little bit later in the next 6 months or so. But I wouldn't say I'm at ketosis 24/7. Now, if you guys work out a lot and if you do CrossFit, I did ketosis for like 3 months and I could not stop losing weight. And so I started to lose muscle mass a little bit too. And so normally what I do is I'm more, maybe about 30 to 35% carbs. I got to have carbs up because of working out, and things like that. But as far as like you're healing your gut, ketosis is good. And then doing that over the course of the next 8 to 12 weeks. Now the 30% is going to come from healthy forms of protein. So this would be like your free range or your wild caught salmon. This would be like your free range beef. Also, cage free, antibiotic, hormone free. Pastured eggs. Pastured eggs, not caged eggs, because there's a higher fat content. It's just way more nutritious. You'll actually see this is probably a caged egg. Store-bought egg, because the yolk isn't very yellow, but you'll need a big difference in the amount of color in the yolk when it's cage-free. So these are all healthy, raw nuts, raw seeds. So those are going to be great sources. And then I'm a huge fan of like grass-fed whey protein. So I love whey protein. Whey protein is great to get healthy sources of proteins on the go. Especially if you don't have a lot of time to sit down and have an elaborate meal. So that cookie dough recipe that we had, you basically just in that little cup, you got about 10 grams of healthy protein. And actually there's something that's really important in whey. It's called cysteine. And cysteine is unbelievable as far as helping your body detox. So detoxification is important once you fix your gut, and the whey protein helps you to do that. So I'll go through like one of these on my own like every month. Like our family goes through probably 2.5 tubs of it every single month. And then your 5% is coming from, your 5% carbs is going to come from, when you're doing this, it's coming from things that have a high amount of prebiotics. So you've heard of probiotics, which help to heal the gut, but that bacteria needs food for it. And so you need some kind of food for it, and prebiotics provide the food and the fiber for the healthy bacteria to grow. And so the best have the most like prebiotic fiber. By the way, who can name this? Who can name this? This? All right. Spinach. I know the chart, it does kind of look like that, yeah. It's spinach. And then this? Did someone say Granny Smith apple? No? Yes, it's an onion, right? So those are the foods that are actually going to be like really great things that you can focus on in order to provide that prebiotic fiber, okay? And then the last thing is to supplement your immunity. Now, a lot of times people ask me, they're like, Dr. Nate, do you supplement or should you supplement? And I say, well, I will say yes. And the only reason why, I mean, listen, I supplement a lot because I do realize that my diet is not perfect. Does anybody here have a perfect diet? No. Oh, no, we really don't. I understand my diet is perfect, but even if I was eating a perfect diet, I understand by testing people, people still have some really big holes when it comes to, even if they're eating a pretty good diet. So you got to understand there are some holes. I will tell you this though, is that you should never use supplementation as a crutch for eating bad. So you're just like, well, hey, listen, I take like a multivitamin and omegas, and I take a probiotic, but I do go to McDonald's 3 times a week, or 3 times a day even. So you understand that if we're talking about nutrition, I would rather have you eat well first, then supplement versus supplement and still eating bad. Obviously, doing both together is desirable. So here's kind of what we do in order to help seal up that leaky gut. Okay. Now, do you know how long it takes for your gastrointestinal lining to completely turn itself over? It's actually 2 weeks, which is why I recommend doing it for 30 days in order to like kind of help seal it up and then let it turn over again after that. So your body's always turning, like your skin, like the top of your skin, it's turning itself over every few days. So different parts of your body replicate and heal. And the inside of the gut's about 2 weeks. So I recommend doing this for at least 4. Sometimes we have people do it for a whole entire 6. Okay. So this is the 30-day supplementation we do. So the type of nutrition plan that you'd be doing would be ketogenic, right? And then as far as supplementation, here's what you would do. So number 1. Max GI. So this is a probiotic, but this is not your generic probiotic that you go and you get at Walgreens, okay? The reason why this is the probiotic that you have to take is because there's something this is a probiotic actually designed for people with leaky gut. So number 1, remember I said small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, right? So you got to first kill that overgrowth that's damaging the gut. That's why inside of the Max GI there's lysozyme, there's thyme, oregano. Those things actually are known to kill the overgrowth, kill the bad cells. Now there's another, most probiotics are lactobacillus based, like what we show that when you're making your own fermented foods. This actually, what you need before that is you need the mother of all probiotics, which is called Bacillus subtilis. So if you have a healthy amount of this, it helps everything else kind of branch off. So this is like your foundation. But not only that, there's some other things like digestive enzymes in it to help you with your digestion. We've had people be like, I started taking this and I don't need my purple pill, my Prilosec or anything. So this will help with your digestive system in your stomach, so at least that food's getting digested as it goes into the gastrointestinal system. Number 2, vitamin D with probiotics. So the reason why is that most people don't realize is that in order for healthy gut motility, meaning moving the food through your gastrointestinal system, vitamin D plays a really critical role in it. And not only that, vitamin D plays a critical role in immune system function. Did you guys know that if you get like 4,000 to 5,000 IUs of vitamin D every day, it's better than the flu shot? They wouldn't tell you that, but So getting enough vitamin D is huge for the immune system, but it's also hugely important for the gastrointestinal system. Magnesium. Magnesium helps with moving the gastrointestinal system along. Remember, you don't want food to sit there and damage the gut. You want the smooth muscle to move that along so that it can go out the south end of your gastrointestinal system. Okay? Now, everybody ever heard of milk of magnesia, right? All right, there you go. And what did you take milk of magnesia for? Constipation, right? So magnesium stimulates the smooth muscle. This is also really good for restless leg syndrome. You know, people who got restless leg, they're like all the time, or they crawl. You have a magnesium deficiency. If you have problems with your IT band, or if you have problems with your plantar fasciitis, take some more magnesium because it helps to relax tendons and ligaments. So this is really important, helping the gastrointestinal system. So this isn't like I'm going to try one of them. This is something that all of them you got to do together. This one right here, this is called sleep and mood formula. Do you guys know, when I said sleep and mood, what hormone is that? Serotonin, right? Well, there's a precursor to serotonin, and it's called 5-hydroxytryptophan. 5-HTP, which is basically like right before the body turns it into serotonin. So there's foods that are very high in serotonin, things like cashews, turkey, right? That's high in 5-HTP. But if your body's having a hard time producing serotonin, then one of the things that you can do is say, hey body, I'm going to give you a little bit of help. And so I'm going to give you a high amount of 5-HTP, and that will help fix the gut and help the brain and body start to communicate a little bit better. I actually take 2 5-HTP every single day. And so these are the precursors, and these are natural, these are not drugs. I also, grass-fed whey protein, the reason why I say that is because the grass-fed whey protein has probiotics in it, but not only that, is that if you're going to be taking what I'm going to go over next, a great thing to do is to put what I'm going to show you next, put it into the whey protein. Because the next thing I'm going to show you does not taste very good, okay? And then the last thing is, how many of you have ever heard of glutamine? Yeah, so everyone's like, you just take probiotics, you know, it fixes everything, and it really doesn't. You have to take what's known as L-glutamine. Glutamine is an amino acid, and if you have a healthy gut, this is like your gut lining, and you have what's known as like a mucosal layer on the inside of your gut. And you can see that if it gets damaged, you can see basically from a cellular level, this is what it looks like, and this is what's, you know, starts to leak through. So that mucosal layer is actually what's to protect it. Glutamine is, by taking glutamine, this helps to rebuild the glucose, or the mucosal layer of the gastrointestinal system. And actually you got to take about 8 grams of it every single day. So this is what it will look like. So if you're, this is what your day would look like. So if you're doing like this for 30 days, when you wake up, you take the Max GI and you take it on a empty stomach. And so if you said, hey, I'm going to start trying to fast. Let's say I've got 6 hours to eat, 18 hours to fast. So you're fasting all the way to here. You eat at 12. And so what you would do is you're going to have basically eating with that ketogenic type macro recommendation, and then you're taking a scoop of protein with 1 to 2 scoops of glutamine, a vitamin D, taking 1 to 2 sleep and mood formula during this time, eating again at 6 o'clock, and then at night you'll take 1 to 2 teaspoons of magnesium. Okay, 1 to 2 teaspoons of magnesium at night. The reason why you want to take it at night is magnesium helps to promote very restful sleep. So I don't want you to take it at like 12 and you're like, and your boss is like, you got to work. I'm sorry, you can't take a nap. So magnesium helps to relax you quite a bit. So I recommend taking it right before you go to bed.